Hello, everyone. My name is Yuan Gao. I'm the head of growth at Helium Foundation. So it's actually my great honor to be here moderating this great panel. At this point, I think there's no doubt that DePIN is one of the hottest topic within the crypto space. And probably my favorite vertical because I think DePIN project are actually set out to solve many of the real world problems and potentially have impact and to create or to disrupt billions, if not trillions of dollars of actual real world economic activities. And also, I think DePIN is potentially the best vertical that blockchain projects can actually break out of the small circles and to become mass adopted. But along with that ambition, I think there's quite a lot of complexity and frictions involved. So today, I want to invite this group of great panelists, just trying to dissect this problem from different perspectives. Without further ado, let's start a round of self-introduction, and please tell us who you are and what you have been working on. Let's start with Kulin.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Kulin. I've been part of the Solana team for about 3 years now, and I lead our efforts in DePIN. And so what that means mostly is about supporting folks who are building DePIN infrastructure on Solana, like Helium, and helping make them successful. Because ultimately, Solana is not a means to an end. Solana is really a way for people to build awesome stuff. And we're particularly excited about DePIN. So I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Hey everyone, I'm Sal Gall. I'm one of the co-founders of Escape Velocity, or EV3. We're a venture fund focused on DePIN.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex Rawitz. I'm one of the co-founders of Demo. We're building a connected vehicle platform on the blockchain, decentralized and open and permissionless.
I'm Abhay Kumar. I'm the CEO of the Helium Foundation, and we're here to enable new business models in wireless networks.
Thank you, guys. Let's kick off the discussion today. I think the first question today is a very macro and open question. So I think we all have the general idea that when bootstrapping a network or physical infrastructure, DePIN definitely has its own merits. For example, the efficiency in capital formation and like the efficiency of coordinating resources in a decentralized and distributed manner. So that's the general idea. But for you guys, what's unique about DePIN, and like why a project should embrace the DePIN paradigm to bootstrap their network to build up physical infrastructures? Let's start with Abhay.
Sure. So we've been very successful over the last few years in building, the world's largest wireless network. And the thing that's important there is I think about something very practical. Like if I, have my phone and I go to a coffee shop, I might have to ask for the Wi-Fi password. And imagine if a sensor out there had to do that for every single coffee shop in a city. That's just not practical. And that sensor might only really be, using a particular hotspot for a very short amount of time, and need to provide some kind of micropayment. Running on a blockchain like Solana might make things, very easy and fast to be able to send that payment, but you kind of need a single environment, an ecosystem where you can, where anyone can sort of permissionlessly put up a hotspot, and anyone can pay for that small amount of coverage that's needed wherever they are, anywhere in the world. And that's really the opportunity for application developers, and that's ultimately where I think about this problem, which is if I'm building an application, a sensor application, I want to use a network like Helium that allows me to work anywhere in the world. And so really excited to see projects actually building this now.
For me, I think one of the interesting parts about what we're building at Demo is really a data ownership model that actually works for users. Data ownership has been a buzzword in the tech industry as a whole for probably a decade now, and the reality is that users themselves have never had good ways to actually permission other developers to utilize that data. Who cares about data ownership if you don't have anything to do with that data? So when we can create a way for people to actually easily own their own data through a DePIN stack, whether that's an IoT device or a set of devices or even an API to a vehicle, when you allow a user to actually own their data and then also build a developer platform on top of it where developers can leverage that data, you're now building a system that actually enhances privacy for users, it puts them in control, and it allows developers and users to much more easily coordinate. So you have now a supply of people who own their own data, they've earned it cheaply, and they've created the incentive for developers to come and build tools for them. That to me is what DePIN can unlock. You have this cheap supply that's created with the incentive model, and then you have developers that can actually provide solutions tailored to those users. And whether it's a use case today or something that we expect to see in the future, like an AI-based use case, those users are actually in full control of their data and able to give context to the developers as they build.
I agree with both of those points. I guess one thing that I've changed my mind on about DePIN over the years has been that I think in the early days of DePIN there was a big focus on low cost. Like the idea was we're going to tap into like supply that's not being used, and that way we're going to have like no marginal cost, and we're going to be able to offer really low cost. I think this was like a little bit of a misguided North Star. I think like what's really powerful about DePIN networks is actually how dynamic they are now. When I look at what like Helium Mobile has done with just like the amount of time from identifying an area as high cost to deploying a Wi-Fi hotspot there is probably an order of magnitude or two lower than what a traditional telco would do. I think similarly with Hive Mapper and Burst, like this idea of like highly targeted dynamic building of supply side, I think is actually way more powerful than just like we're going to lower costs for folks. And so I think it's been, this is one of the things I've changed my mind on, and basically just seeing the success of networks like Demo and Helium and Hive Mapper and many others as different way of how I've had to change my thinking as an investor.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say essentially the same thing. It's a little maybe weird for me to say this, but I think decentralization in many instances is very overrated and actually just makes life much harder. But DePIN is one of the few places in which the decentralization of the network, actually distributing the task of operating the hardware to the local operator, actually makes the thing so much better. Because the person is much faster at getting the job done, and they have like the local expertise. Like there are many instances in which, hey, like there's this specific part of town that's not mapped yet on Hive Mapper, but like this driver knows the right way to go, how to get there quickly, or this person who lives in this town knows the best place in town to put the hotspot. He knows the owner of the real estate, and so he can get the deal done to get the hotspot in the right place. Like I think that unique local expertise is one of the reasons why DePIN can actually be so effective. And it's one of the few cases, I think, in crypto where the decentralization actually makes the product better rather than is like this thing that makes the thing harder.
Yeah, I agree with you all. I think we touch upon on many important attributes of DePIN, like so data sovereignty, how to scale like a large-scale ubiquitous network so that people can access the network with less friction, and also like the demand side and supply side elasticity, like how to boost the demand and in a very dynamic way. So yeah, I think it's a great way to kick off the conversation, and I want to move on to the next question. So I want to talk about modularity and composability of DePIN. So actually, I have the very similar conversation with many DePIN project founders in the past. So actually, to build the complexity of building up the DePIN tech stack is actually quite difficult, right? You have to deal with hardware, you have to deal with the off-chain computation services, and you need to build up oracles, on-chain protocols, tokenomics, and last but not least, the user interface. So for a startup to tackle that kind of problem is actually quite overwhelming. And it's actually a quite challenging task. But on the flip side, it also presents some opportunity for platform or teams to actually to build up middlewares or like generalized abstract layer of service for the DePIN projects to be utilizing. So that's on the modularity side. Also, I think there are many different kind of protocols on blockchain platform right now, right? So like oracles, DeFi. So actually, that presents a great opportunities for DePIN projects to be integrated into and to provide a lot of convenience for them. So I want to hear your experience and your view on this, like what's going to happen in the future and how DePIN projects can utilize all the resources to make it easier to bootstrap. For this question, I want to start with Abai, because actually, Helium, I think from the infra side, Helium has tried a lot of things in the past, even to build up their own layer 1, and then moving to Solana and integrated with different Solana protocols. So I think you have quite a lot of experience on these questions. So I want to start with you. Yeah.
I'll try to summarize as much as I can. As you said, like we've spent a ton of time on this. And we started as our own L1 back in 2019. Started working on this as a decentralized project in 2018, launched the L1 in 2019, and launched all of the blockchain components directly on the hotspots themselves. And so each hotspot was a full node, all able to be in consensus at any time. We had a consensus group. We built our own BFT, we built our own DKG, we built a lot of stuff on our own because there wasn't really any other option at the time that made sense or like clearly was the right choice given the scale that we were hoping for. Certainly if we were starting with like a 10 node consensus group or whatever, like it would have been fine to just use anything out there. If we only had like 100 users, it would have been fine to use anything out there. All okay, and like I don't blame folks for landing on certain chains or whatever, but it was, at the time, we were just trying to build at a certain scale that we knew was probably going to happen. The first build of Helium hotspots was 10,000 devices, and we wanted each of them to be on chain, like running their own chain. So this is what we started with. Over time, we grew into the largest, as far as I know, the largest like gossip-based P2P network running on like individual hardware in people's houses over pretty terrible internet, dealing with things like NAT and dealing with like, all sorts of things. And eventually moved to a validator model, a staked validator model. Because of that, we sort of tipped the code that was already running on these hotspots, on these Raspberry Pi 4s, and moved them to at least cloud infrastructure. And that helped us scale for a little bit. And then from there, after about a year, actually the anniversary of us moving to Solana is actually just like next week, I think. So pretty timely to be here and talking about it. We moved to Solana, and each one of those steps sort of brought us new scale. And I think the kinds of things that I think about right now, obviously, I mean the most very personal thing, I'm glad I don't have to carry a pager anymore. I'm glad Totally does, so that's great. But like other things like being able to integrate with other things that are already on Solana. We built our own price feeds on our own L1. These days we just use PithNet, and it's great. PithNet's an SVM fork that settles Oracle data back to Solana and several other chains, and that's great for us. We don't have to build that. We have like 90,000 active people using Jupyter today. Jupyter's a swap interface on Solana. And that's something that we didn't have to build. We didn't have to build swaps. We didn't have to build DeFi. We didn't have to build generic smart contracts. This is sort of the advantage as you sort of scale up. And ultimately for me, I think about, you have to be in an environment that sort of fits your user base. And the user base that I hope to achieve is the entire human population. And you have to, and certainly I wouldn't give Colleen this much credit. Like, I don't think Solana's ready for that yet, but we'll get there. And I think that's one of the things that we're happy to work on as well.
I think it's interesting to talk about the blockchain layer and sharing components like device identity. I mean, there's several L1s that have spun up to specifically focus on DePIN. I think you can do it on a generalized L1, whether it's Solana or Polygon or another one. And actually, Demo, we're going to be working with a handful of DePIN companies just to use our device identity contracts. But stepping up from the infrastructure layer, there's also the application layer, which matters a lot too. And so we have this hardware device that uses the Helium IoT network, and this isn't really at the infrastructure layer of DeMo, it's at the application layer. And we'll collaborate not just with companies at that smart contract layer, but also with EV charging companies, virtual power plant companies, where it makes sense to have some sort of application link between, let's say, a connected electric vehicle on the DeMo network and a DePIN project focused on decentralized energy. So these things, these links and this interoperability can exist at both the infrastructure layer and the application layer, which is why I think, when DePIN gets me really excited about crypto, because it starts to look like the real world and the real economy when these things are actually interlinked and reliant on each other.
Yeah, and actually, if I add another layer to that, there's also what I've started seeing here just in Hong Kong in the last few days is composability at the hardware layer, where people are starting to combine devices and have the same device perform multiple functions, which I think is super interesting because it's like a useful service that's being provided and makes scaling up the DePIN network much easier. But from the user perspective, who's effectively the node operator, you are multiplying your earnings potential insofar as the same piece of hardware is now generating use, generating use through multiple protocols. And so it's actually really cool to see the way in which the DePIN community at so many levels gets to work together. I think it's a ton of fun.
Yeah, there's a great example right back there, Sourceful. They're running on rack Helium hotspots, and they're working in the energy sector, and I think that's pretty cool. There's so much hardware out there. There's so much latent compute out there now that the Helium hotspots don't have to run a full chain anymore. I think other projects should use them, and I think there's sort of complementary projects out there that could use them.
I guess the only piece I'd add on there from a venture perspective is that DePIN is now finally a big enough category that there are actual crypto infrastructure for DePIN companies that see DePIN as a big enough addressable market. I think Alex mentioned this with layer ones, but there's also now liquidity aggregators. There's off-chain data verification companies that are specifically focused on DePIN. So even for the pieces that don't exist yet, I think scrappy DePIN entrepreneurs are finding people within crypto to partner with today to make it a lot easier and more efficient to experiment with things early.
Yeah, definitely. I think there are quite a lot of existing DePIN projects already using quite a lot of hardwares. So I think it's actually a great resource to multiple reuse those hardware for other potential use cases. I think that's a great way of composability. And also, I totally agree with what Alex said. It's not just on the infra layer, but also on the application layer. So I think DePIN projects can work together to create more sophisticated services for its own users. I'm gonna move to next question. So next question, I want to talk about growth and scalability of DePIN projects. So I think both Helium and DeMo have a tremendously successful record of bootstrapping a large-scale global or regional networks. In a very short time frame, this has not been done before if we are using a traditional infra development paradigm. So what's your experience and approach? What have been done right, and what's the hard lessons you have to learn in this process? So I think this question is mainly for Alex and Abhay, but welcome to jump in if you have.
I'll kick things off. We share the aspirations of Helium in the sense of our market is the whole world. Every driver, every person with a car, every person with a vehicle. And we, in the first year of DeMo, we got really excited about pursuing that big vision and started to design a lot of our marketing and our growth tactics around going mainstream. And we got a little bit ahead of ourselves. We realized that most of our personas, most of the people that are interested in what we're building today are really super early adopters, mainly in the crypto space, but in tech more generally. And so we realized that like we have a lot of people to address in the crypto space before we worry about getting a person in the U.S. we'd say like a person buying something from Demo off the shelf in Walmart. And so we learned some lessons over the past there. I think if I had to summarize, like there's a tremendous amount of energy and potential in the crypto space and people that want to try these products. But the vast majority of people in crypto have never actually like bought a hardware device, installed it in some way. Like they've probably experimented purely with digital products. And events like this do a really great job of introducing new people into what really isn't that scary of an environment. Like this is a very plug and play device. You use our mobile app and a lot of the wires are already hidden, and we're continuing to improve the crypto infrastructure in the sense of like making the wallets easier and better. But we maintain those aspirations of being able to bring our products away from crypto and into the mainstream world. So it just looks and feels like a great technology product, not a crypto product. And I think that's the major opportunity that the DePIN space has to actually be one of the best bridges into the mainstream tech world. For all the people there that are either skeptical of crypto, just don't really care, and otherwise just want good products.
Yeah, and just to sort of bridge from there, I think user experience ultimately is what matters. You're absolutely right. Like most people don't care about crypto. Most people just want an app that just works. Right. That's it. And they, when you think about that, for Helium's growth, a lot of it I would attribute to two things. One, obviously we spent a ton of time on user experience, and the other thing was timing. With all I've been in startups for many years, and a great idea is great, but timing matters way more. And there's certain things that happen that make things really possible, and really sort of drive foundational companies and foundational protocols. So for us, what the timing was COVID. Like, to be very direct about it, people were home, they were bored, they were willing to go up on their roof, and they were willing to put up antennas and post it on the internet and flex to their internet friends. That was a thing, and that really did enable a tremendous amount of deployment of Helium infrastructure. Daniel's in the audience out there, and he and his buddies in Portugal were running around roofs and sort of putting up towers, and that's really awesome, right? That's really what I think us as a sort of human race needed at the time. We wanted to be connected to other humans because many of us were stuck at home or things like that. So I think timing does matter. On the user experience side, I mean, obviously timing, that moment came and passed, thankfully, and other things need to be there. I think so focusing on user experience there really matters as well. For the average Helium mobile user, the goal is to show them a normal, cellular product. They don't need to care about the crypto. They just need to know that they can pick up their phone and make a call, or they can go on Instagram and scroll feeds, or get on some chat app and talk to their friends. That's what they want access to. And the way it comes to them is through this application and through this sort of protocol that is significantly cheaper for that, for that company to offer them that service. So I started off describing Helium as a better way and an opportunity to create better business models in wireless. And that's really what Helium is about. Helium Mobile as a company can provide a cheaper, more accessible service to their customers, whether or not they're in crypto or whatever. They just want really great service, and it's coming to them, and Helium Mobile is able to offer it at a competitive price anywhere in the country and now anywhere in the world with international roaming.
There's one thing I would add, actually. This is less of a near-term thing, but I think over a longer time horizon of, say, multiple years, one of the things actually I'm personally really excited for that I think will make scaling any future DePIN network easier is just broader social acceptance of this idea of being a node operator. Today, working in the gig economy is this socially accepted thing. People drive for Uber or deliver for Deliveroo or DoorDash or whatever, and people understand that. And so I think we're going to see a world in which being a node operator is also just a socially accepted thing where, yeah, if I drive for Uber, I also have a dash cam on my car, that is collecting data for HiveMapper. I also have the demo device that's sort of tracking my automotive data. Like, that's just going to be a socially accepted thing. People are not necessarily going to care about the crypto element of it, but it's this thing that they do. It provides a service. It earns them, some nice supplemental income. You're not retiring off it necessarily, but it's like a great thing. And so that is something that like I really look forward to seeing, and we're starting to see that. Like, random people I know have, or I've been in Ubers where they just have the dash cam on the car, and I'm like, whoa, okay. So something to come.
The one piece I'll add that I think these two guys are being really modest about is just like building a really good consumer product is really hard, and scaling it. I think doing it in a way that's also open is like, that's like the trade-off that you have to focus on. And having seen both really successful examples and also a lot of DePIN projects that are still working to break out, it's like the level of empowerment that you give your early community actually is like probably the strongest like leading indicator of success for an ecosystem. I think you saw this like definitely with Helium, with Demo, with the other communities that are really big now. And so I hope that as we see more DePIN entrepreneurs, more people take this path of like really authentically, genuinely having open code, open governance, open open community engagement as part of these projects.
Yeah, I agree with you all. I think how to provide values to users and provide a very good user experience is like a way to scale your project, and also like the social acceptance, the awareness, and also like the convergence with the gig economy. That's also a very important thing to actually to grow your acceptance. Actually, on the scalability and growth side, I have a follow-up question for Colin. So I think in the past couple of years, we actually saw Solana. There's quite a lot of DePIN projects coming to Solana, like Helium, Render, Network, HiveMapper, Teleport, and among many others. Like, what's your strategy on the growth side, like to attract those projects to come, and like want to hear your view on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's something I've thought about a fair bit. So there's one piece of it, which is it's not a strategy. It's just a question of like, what is Solana? And so Solana was built to be really like solve a pragmatic problem, which is like, okay, how do you have one consensus layer, one execution machine that's just ridiculously scalable and cheap and just works? And so that was like very much the philosophy around Solana. And what you'll see is like, especially with a lot of the earliest DePIN founders and some of the most successful ones, is that they're very pragmatic people. For them, what are they trying to accomplish? They're trying to build like a global telecommunications network, or an amazing data product, or an amazing like mapping data product, or like great car data. Like, that's their goal. Crypto is a means to that end, but they're very pragmatic people. And so for them, I think Solana resonated as a thing to use because it was just the most efficient way for them to achieve the outcome that they wanted to achieve. So I think that was like the original product market fit, if you will, that Solana had within DePIN, is that it resonated with like the most pragmatic builders. And then I think that's a lot of what Helium, Render, HiveMapper, sort of the earliest DePIN projects on Solana saw. And now over time, that remains true, but the other reason now that people are picking sort of DePIN on Solana is because increasingly a lot of the attention in the crypto world and the liquidity in the crypto world is on Solana. And so as people have seen sort of multiple DePIN projects on Solana have multi-billion-dollar market caps, I think that started turning attention, and Solana is now becoming more and more like the default choice for a lot of builders. And so there's a little bit of a narrative element here as well. And then because they're DePIN project on Solana, I think the last thing that's really at play here is that people are building infrastructure to support the DePIN projects on Solana more and more. So there are teams like SoulSplits that are building, the ability for you to easily track your taxes as a node operator for Solana DePIN projects. And so it just becomes easier and easier to launch and scale DePIN projects on Solana as you have other DePIN projects to learn from, you have supporting infrastructure for DePIN specifically, and of course, all of this is on top of a network that is just very scalable, fast, cheap, and gets the job done.
Thanks for that answer. So for next question, I want to move to AI and DePIN. So obviously, AI plus DePIN is getting a huge amount of attention in the past year. So we saw that there are quite a lot of existing projects and new projects are actually embracing or pivoting to the AI direction narrative. So this question is for Saul and for Colin. So what's your view on this? Is it like using AI plus DePIN, is it a viable path to put AI computation resources on DePIN? Like what would be the potential use cases, and in the long run, like what's the competitive landscape is going to be like? Yeah.
Yeah, I can start with this one because there's a ton of on Solana activity at the intersection of AI and DePIN, so I get a bunch of exposure to this. I think it's actually a sort of multi-part ecosystem because really what we're seeing a lot of is DePIN approaches to solving various parts of the model creation and operation process. So all the way from the start of like, how do you collect differentiated data to train a large language model? So there are a bunch of DePIN approaches with folks like Grass and others who are building decentralized data capture at the user level. Sometimes it's browser extension, sometimes it's health data. There are many things. And so there's sort of a data element. And then there's a second piece, and this is probably the most popular one, which is around compute. How do you take GPU supply that exists and apply that for training or for inference? And I think actually the use cases at each of these things are slightly different and have different nuances. So for data collection, I actually think the DePIN playbook makes a ton of sense. Like, there's a cool example that the Grass team was telling me about, which is that most of the internet today is in English, and that's fine. But if you want to train a French large language model or a Swedish large language model, you actually need to browse and scrape the internet from French IP addresses or Swedish IP addresses. And so the geographic distribution of users matters a lot. And so having a decentralized approach, we can incentivize people in various regions to give up their IP address and let you browse the internet through their portal is actually quite useful. So that's an example where the decentralized approach actually uniquely, like there's a fit there. Like it makes sense to do that. And so that's on the data layer. And then on the sort of compute part of the equation, I think you're not going to use decentralized GPUs to train like GPT-5, like for a bunch of reasons. One, you don't have enough GPUs. Two, actually the interconnect between GPUs matters a lot. Like to train a large model, you don't want 10,000 GPUs. What you want is one really, really, really powerful GPU. So for a bunch of practical reasons, I don't think you're going to see like huge models used by or trained by decentralized networks. I think what you will see is very use case specific, like edge models. So you're starting to see a lot of work in the AI world to have models that you can run locally on your phone. And so these are going to be smaller models with only maybe a few billion parameters. And those smaller models, though, you actually can run inference on those models on just one GPU. And so for those, I think actually it makes a ton of sense to have a decentralized GPU network in which you can access one very nearby, like easily accessible GPU and pay to have the inference run there. Anyways, I'll stop hogging the airtime. But I think the sort of takeaway here is that I think there absolutely is a fit, but there's a little bit of nuance at every part of the stack.
So,
yeah, I agree with everything that Colleen said around the ecosystem is really exploding right now in terms of activity, and there's experimentation at every layer of the stack. I think we'll see a lot over the next 2 years in terms of how it shakes out. For me, AI and DePIN are just the most natural. It's like unstoppable force meets a movable object. Like these two things naturally fit very well together because I think of AI as like from a consumer aspect, like the universal UI. Like it's going to be the easiest way to interact with anything, but you need to give it a lot of context. And DePIN is how it collects context through data, whether it's about your car or the weather around you, or like data from language model data. This is such a natural fit, and I think the rise of AI enables a lot more DePIN experimentation from business models that can collect data extremely efficiently but don't know how to monetize it. I'll give one example of a company called Frodobots that's doing like sidewalk delivery robots and collecting enough data to hopefully train a model to be able to do autonomous sidewalk driving robots for local delivery. It's like, imagine without DePIN, without AI, the version of doing this would be like you create this model, you train it yourself, and now you like build a food delivery business on top of it, maybe, and that's like step 1, 2, 3, many risks. With some of these AI crypto networks, you can potentially just grab this data, contribute it to the network, and let other food delivery networks build that business or sell it to other sorts of data. So I think there's a very natural fit on both on the data collection side and on sort of like a UI on the future of how these networks interact. And as Colleen mentioned on the infrastructure side, I mean, you need GPUs, compute, and you need a shit ton of energy, and you need a lot of data. And DePIN is a good way to crowdsource all of these things.
Alex and Abhay, do you have some points to add on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point that both of you guys are making is really around composability, right? Like, ultimately, like, we're trying to compose across resources, and some of it might be about collecting data, some of it might be about compute, inference, serving some of this infrastructure. There's like great compute networks out there that are like, run my Docker instance in the cloud, right? Like Akash being one of them, and there's several others. Render gives us like, okay, like I want to run ray tracing on an enormous network, or I want to be able to do some AI applications on IONet or anything like these. I think like ultimately, like if I'm building an app, I want to know that I can sort of not only like use all these different things and compose across all of them, but also kind of know the quality of the data. I think one of the things that Grass I know of is working on, at least, is trying to like tag every single piece of data as like, here's the IP address and here's a context that it was taken. And so then when I'm like sort of aggregating across, and I've been like in and out of machine learning things for like over a decade now, unfortunately. That's how old I am, I guess. But like, like it's these like your data quality matters, and the bias that goes into your model matters a lot. I'm sure that when Alex thinks about building a model on car data, he wants to know if like is the data that's being collected in kilometers or miles an hour. Like it actually matters very much for like road wear of your tires, right? So like all of that like very specific information is important, and that sort of needs to feed all the way through the model. And so that when you get this sort of chat GPT like endpoint, you kind of know where it came from and like what the sort of quality of it is.
I think we spend a lot of time talking about the large language models as well, but when we think about what you could do with AI in the demo world, we think about vehicle data, we think about machine data, and actually how are we going to leverage that. And one problem that DePIN solves for anyone that wants to tackle that problem, which, by the way, free idea, we'd love to see somebody come and build an AI for your car on top of Demo. But anyone that wants to tackle that problem has to immediately, if you were starting from zero, you'd immediately have to grapple with the fact that there's 25 large automakers in the world. And every 4 to 8 years, those automakers actually tend to change the computers that are actually operating inside those cars. They have these vehicle platforms, as they're called, and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of vehicle platforms. So if you actually wanted to get data from each of those vehicle platforms, you have to build the ability to collect data from each of them uniquely. And that's even if you can get past the first step of cutting a deal with every automaker, with Toyota and BMW and Ford and all that stuff. And so we've chosen to go, instead of top down like that, if we go out to the users and create this DePIN network, we can actually have users that are collecting that data across today. I think we have something like over 10,000 unique models of cars already connected to Demo. Like now we can start to gather data on each of these unique models and start to develop models of cars and start to develop the models for AI that would live on top of it.
Yeah, thank you all. That's great insights on the AI side. So we're almost running out of time. Last question. So I just want to, actually this is for everyone. So I want to get a very simple or like a quick prediction, like what's going to happen in the DePIN space. I think Saul touched upon this in your keynote speech earlier, but like maybe everyone can share like 1 or 2 points that you think would happen in the DePIN space. Who want to start first?
I think that we'll see, hopefully this year, maybe it takes, between this year and into 2025, at least 3, let's say, DePIN projects really break out of crypto. I think Helium Mobile is probably, the furthest along in that regard. We have our own aspirations to get there, and I'm sure there'll be a couple of others that land products into the mainstream world where people don't even know this is a crypto product. And then we have true mass adoption, which is, of course, probably why this whole conference exists.
I'm good with that one. Actually, I think that's awesome.
I guess I'll make a. I think DePIN today, if you add it up, is probably like 4 or 5% of crypto market cap if you strip out Bitcoin and ETH and stables. So like alts, I guess, alts market cap. I think this will, be double digits by the end of the year.
Wow. Okay, we're really going out there. For me, I'll take a slightly different financial view on this, which is the thing that I think we'll see, and I really want to see, because I think that means like we'll really be off for the races, is sort of multiple DePIN projects that are earning, let's say, tens of millions of dollars in revenue a year from their core service. I think if we get to that point where we have DePIN projects that are demonstrating, like a bunch of them demonstrating real ARR, then it'll help catalyze Alex's goal, because then like the traditional world, the traditional investor base will start realizing that these are like real businesses. And I think that's something we might see in the next year or two.
I mean, I think I'll add to that and just say that like our space is just so small, right? Like I'm very proud that we have 250,000 wallets that are active in the Helium ecosystem, but that is not human scale, like by any means. And like we need more human scale applications in DePIN. I think certainly thinking about cars, thinking about connectivity, thinking about energy, like these are all like the spaces that we should be building more in. So I'm excited to see more of that.
Great. I think we had a pretty comprehensive discussion today. And thanks everyone for sticking to listen to the conversation. And let's give a round of applause to our panelists. And thanks for being here. Thank you.